It's a Sunday and I have what they call a day off. It's a whole nother subject for a whole nother video. I drive truck for a living. Truck drivers understand exactly what I'm talking about just by the way I said it. But I'm building this Rebuilding America foundation and I'm trying to build it from the ground up, and right now I'm just trying to get a fund started because I definitely want to keep it a private foundation. I want as little government intervention as possible in it because government doesn't fix things generally. But I thought I'd tell my story and why I'm so why this is one of them things that I'm really passionate about when it comes to helping the homeless. There's there's a lot of things I learned through personal experience, and I learned a lot of things about the homeless. Most homeless people don't want to be homeless. There is a misconception in that. Unfortunately, there's some people out there that they are scammers, and it's hard to tell them apart from the homeless. If you've ever been homeless, it's a little bit easier for you to tell them apart, but for the average person, it's really difficult to tell them apart, and that creates a lot of issues for the homeless too. But my story really starts, I was born in New Jersey, part of the Ramapo Nation. Grew up first 10 years of my life in New Jersey, and my parents moved up to Sullivan County, New York. It's a really poor county, but had a lot of history. It's rich in history. I mean, I grew up in the area where a lot of the Jewish hotels are, including the Raleigh, which I used to work at the Raleigh. And there's a ballroom in the Raleigh that millions of Americans have seen, and they've never stepped foot in them in New York, but they've all seen the ballroom. There was a bar behind the curtains that I used to take care of every day. That was my baby, the Swizzle Stick Lounge. But the final scene of Dirty Dancing, that's the ballroom that the dance scene was shot in. Uh, we used to take that ballroom apart every day and redo the floors and put it all back together. And yeah, that ballroom and that bar, they were my babies. But the Borscht Belt kind of, just like the movie stated, it was just dying. And now it's pretty well, all the hotels are pretty much gone. I don't think any of the hotels are left. But I wound up making my way down to Florida when the last hotel that I worked at closed down. I was an executive. I finally made myself up onto the executive rung of the ladder after climbing my way up and up and up and up. Then the hotel closed down. Story of my life. So I wound up in Florida. My parents were in Florida or down in Florida, and I wound up down in Florida to start everything over. And I wound up getting a job at Walmart, and that's where I met my ex-wife. I fell in love with her from the first time I saw her. It took me 3 months to introduce myself to her, but and 3 months later we were married. I knew I was going to marry her though from the very first time I saw her. But we were starting to get on our feet. We got married in 2007, late 2007. We were getting on our feet, and things just didn't work out at Walmart. It wasn't a big deal, but there was some issues with things, and so I wound up leaving. And I got a job on a construction site through a staffing agency. We were building the Marriott Hotel there in Palm Coast, the one right by the water tower. I can't remember the exact name of that hotel, but it's one of the Marriott hotels right there by the water tower. And I started picking up garbage and digging ditches. And after my first day there, though, the general contractor, the boss, he just loved the way I worked. I mean, I had the whole site cleaned up in a day, and he told me, he's like, I've had crews in here with 3 or 4 guys, and they couldn't clean this place up in a day. So he really liked me, and we hit it off really well, and I wound up becoming one of the staples of the work site. And at the time, they had to keep me on the staffing agency, but he liked me so much, and he was really close with the electricians. So they got together and they decided they were going to swap me back and forth so they could keep me on this site. They didn't want to lose me to somebody else. And it was a really awesome job. In the end, I was actually working side by side with the electricians, just like an apprentice. And there's a lot of the junction boxes and breaker boxes in there that I personally wired myself. I wired the left side, and the main electrician wired the right side, and we worked side by side. Was teaching me everything. And the company was called E-Tech, and I got to meet the owner of the company. And they told me, they said, when the job was done, they wanted me to come on with them full time, get my apprenticeship, do my journeymanship. They told me within 3 years I'd be making a 6-figure salary. It's a lot of money, especially when, at that time I'm making $1,600 a month. But had our whole, everything was coming together. I mean, we were struggling. We were one of the first victims of that whole housing crash before anybody really understood what was going on, because we were renting a house, and we wound up renting from a really shady real estate agency. And we fell a week behind on the rent. I got the rent caught up. It wasn't like we didn't get the rent caught up. I got the rent caught up, and they just screwed us completely over. They didn't give us a proper receipt for the rent. We had a receipt. It just wasn't the proper receipt. And then it turns out that was one of them first houses that, one of the earlier houses in the whole housing crash debacle. And if a lot of people remember, there was major issues with people renting houses and not knowing they were foreclosed on. Yeah, me and my ex-wife. And we really got screwed really bad. I mean, in Florida at the time, you couldn't go to your own eviction hearing or anything. It was almost done in secret. It was all just a big debacle. It was a big mess. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that the house was being foreclosed on, and we didn't know it. So we wound up moving to Flagler Beach and staying in the hotel, and I was working on this construction site, and things were coming together. It was rough for us, but it was coming together. And then Friday, my last Friday that I worked there, right before it was the weekend that the whole world came apart for everybody in America, we were sitting there, and I'm with Buddha. I called him Buddha. He, big guy, big belly, and Kevin and Mike, and they were talking about this major contract that E-Tech had just lost. It was like it was a multi-million-dollar contract, and they said it was weird that, just the rug came out from underneath it really unexpectedly, and they didn't understand why. And when I went to work the following Monday morning, they lost something like $36 million in contracts. I mean, pretty much the company was going under. It was a death knell for the company. They were going under, and we just had to finish that job at the job site. But they had to start cutting people at the job site, and unfortunately, after we just the Monday before that Friday went through this whole thing, got to meet everybody, planned out my whole future. I'm one of the first people that they had to let go. And from there, it just went downhill really fast. Within a month, me and my wife, 3 dogs, living temporarily in the woods in a shack that I made us from plywood and 2x4s and tree branches. Sorry, I had to blow my nose there. But yeah, we were living in this shack, and the pastor from my stepdaughter's church was able to help us get a car, and that's where we started rebuilding from, was with that car. That was our home for about 6 months while we saved up my unemployment. We stayed out in the Ocala forest a lot. Got chased out of Flagler Beach, our home. We got chased out of Flagler Beach for sleeping in our car. That was really horrible. That was our home. Flagler Beach was our home. That's where we moved to, and that's where we wanted to be. And things just went wrong, and police didn't want homeless people there, and the cop just said the most horrible things to us. I mean, he was a real piece of work. I'm not going to say what I really think about him, but yeah, he was a real piece of work. And so we wound up out in the Ocala forest and living out of food pantries and saving up my unemployment. And I was trying to work, but there was no work at all at that time. I mean, it was bad. I mean, there really just was no work. I mean, it was like a light switch too. I mean, 1 month, everywhere you look, there's jobs. A month later, everybody's unemployed and there's no jobs. I mean, it was like that. It was a light switch. It literally did. It happened in a weekend. And we wound up saving up enough money, and we bought this RV from a used camper place. And we wound up with the worst luck on our way back to the Ocala forest. We were gonna, in a couple weeks, get a place at a normal campground and start building up from there. And our camper overheated, our RV overheated, so I parked it on the side of the road. We went back to our campsite, and the next morning we went to pick up the RV and we couldn't find it. And it was funny because we thought we knew where we parked the RV. And it was interesting because we both did the same thing. We're driving down the road. Actually, my ex-wife was driving. I didn't even have my license at the time. My ex-wife was driving. And we're going down the road, and we both do one of these here. And then we looked at each other. I said, "No, it's up the road, Father." But there's this big black spotch on the road. Our RV burnt down overnight. And yeah, man, bad luck. I'm telling you. And we just paid everything we owned for that RV. Everything we had, we paid for that RV. And the guy could have been a real dick. He could have really just left us out to dry. But when he heard what happened, when we figured out that the RV wasn't stolen, that it actually burnt down on the side of the road, and we figured out what all happened, and I still say, to this day, somebody tried to steal the RV, but I don't know. because I don't understand how it. I think there's still more to that story than what we ever figured out, but I don't know. But he found us a camper, and he helped us get it up to St. Augustine to a little campground called Shamrock Campground. That was a really nice place. But me and my ex-wife, we were under so much stress at this time, and our marriage was really, we were really struggling, and I was trying to get back to work, and I couldn't find anything sustainable. I could get a day labor job here and there, a little bit of money here and there, but I couldn't get a sustainable job. And because I was a construction worker, I qualified for a Pell Grant, and I was gonna go and get my security guard certification because it was something I'd be able to do in just a couple short weeks. Because it used to be when you got these Pell Grants, it's one of the things that the Obama administration did right was they fixed that Pell Grant program. It used to be you'd get the Pell Grant program, and they would pay for your whole whatever the course was that you were taking. But if you got a job, you couldn't finish your Pell Grant training. You had to drop out and go to work. But the people that wherever you were going, they were still getting the money. So what they did was they fixed it where you could still continue the education even if you got a job because it was already paid for. So it's one of the things that the Obama administration did right, because it really was. It was a waste of money. Billions of dollars was wasted on, well, maybe not billions, but I'm sure hundreds of millions of dollars nationwide was wasted on that program because of a very bad rule. And they fixed that rule. So when I found out they fixed that rule, I was like, you know what? Then I should go get my CDL. That's how I wound up doing this. And my ex-wife and I, we were going through a lot, and she wound up filing for a divorce. And I wound up just leaving her with the camper. I didn't want her out in the streets, so I left her with the camper. The place was paid up for the month, and I slept in a ditch to get my CDL. I slept in a ditch across from the school to get my CDL. And the night before my road test, some of my classmates had figured out what was going on, and so they made sure that I stayed with them that night before so that I'd be well rested and showered and really ready to take my road test. I don't think I've because I wasn't trying to let anybody know what was going on. Nobody knew. But when they figured it out, so they helped me out with that, and I don't think I would have been able to pass my road test if I slept all night on the cold ground in a ditch, hungry, dirty, tired. But thanks to them, I was able to pass my road test. I passed my road test with flying colors. I breezed right through it. And from there, I had to start looking for a job. Fortunately, I was still able to use my address from where I was for everything with my license and everything. And so that saved me. And while I was looking into companies and filling out applications, I was literally living on the streets of St. Augustine. I lived with two other guys, ironically, another one named Buddha. I have a tendency of attracting people named Buddha. But I was with can't remember the other guy's name, Kevin or Keith or Mark. Might have been Mark, but it was three of us, and we watched out for each other. But we were sleeping every night in the circle. There's a circle behind the library, and I wound up getting my application through, and a company called Night Transportation picked up my application, and we arranged everything for a week from that day. Had my Greyhound ticket. I was going up to Indianapolis, and I was going to go through their Squire program, and I had to wash my clothes, and it was so embarrassing. I had to stand out there on the road holding a sign begging for money so I could wash my clothes and be clean when I got up there to Indianapolis. It was degrading. Yeah, it was really degrading. But in total, I lived out on me and my wife and three dogs. We lived out. I guess it took us about 6 or 7 months before we were finally in that camper. And then when our marriage almost unraveled there and she filed for the divorce, I wound up living out on the streets myself for another 2 to 3 months. So I definitely know the plight of being homeless, and I know how degrading it can be and how hard it is once you get stuck. I mean, in the beginning, you still have a chance of getting out of it, but every day that you spend homeless, it multiplies multiple times by how much harder it's going to be for you to get off the streets. But yeah, my ex-wife wound up coming and finding me, and we tried saving the marriage, but there was a lot of damage mentally done, especially to my ex-wife, and she never recovered. And in the end, it wasn't the only reason why we got divorced, but it was a very big contributing factor that wound up leading to us ultimately getting divorced, even though we tried for 10 years. But now here I am. I got a career. I got a really awesome girlfriend. I got a 16-year-old stepson. He's cool. He's a spoiled brat, but he's a good kid. He is, though. He's a spoiled brat. But he's a good kid. He's not one of them bad spoiled brats. And I'm watching, the world start to come apart again. And this time I know I'm a little bit okay. I got a few years before my job's gonna be taken away by a computer. Driving a truck, and I might lose my job to a computer. But I really stopped paying attention to politics for a few years here now. 3, 4 years. Ever since Trump got elected. I mean, I pay attention to what's in the winds, but I haven't really been following. But I know, all these problems that, are in our government, and how hard it is to how all this red tape that the government puts in, and all the bureaucracy, and that's not a big help for the homeless either. The 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 over bureaucracy, the over bloated bureaucracy is just too much. And that's why I'm trying to build this foundation from the ground up with as little to no government involvement as much as possible, because government involvement just creates issues for homeless people. And I understand what I really do. I understand what it's like to be homeless, and I understand what homeless people go through, and I understand even just getting back into society. I've never even really recovered myself. I've I have issues with social anxiety prior to that, and I kind of muscled my way through it. One of the reasons, anybody who's ever seen Flight of the Navigator, Howard Hughes had a lot of issues that he had overcome, and he didn't want certain people knowing about him because there was already too many people that knew when he had to fight the government. And that's what, that whole scene about his insanity, that's what that's all about, is him fighting his own germophobia and anxieties and things like that. And he became one of them real life inspirations for me. But I muscled my way through. But after that, being on the streets like that, I've never fully recovered. I mean, like a lot of it's, I can talk on the camera. I don't look at the camera all the time. I do look at it. I make sure I make eye contact with it, but I don't look at it all the time. And it's extremely difficult for me to want to, one of the things that I wound up falling back that I had gotten over was my whole, I mean, most people have a phobia of talking on the phone. Mine was a real, and I still do. I rarely talk on the phone to anybody because I just not comfortable at all talking on a phone when I can't see people. I mean, beyond just that uncomfortability, I mean, I have a heart, you can tell anybody who knows me, they can tell when I'm talking on the phone that I'm definitely going through anxiety because my whole demeanor, everything about me is completely different when I'm on a phone. But it's hard to get out of that trap. And that's why, everything that I'm trying to do with this foundation, it's because of those experiences and because of that hand-on knowledge of how difficult it can be to get out. And the obstacles that even when you start to get on your feet that you would still face. That's why, I want to build the program the way I want to. I want to use kind of the Habitat for Humanity type system where the people we help, instead of them just being plain volunteers and helping build other houses, we're going to make the renovation of other houses a work program and a job training program for people that, especially people that have been long-term unemployed, because that's a major issue. Because now they'll no longer be long-term unemployed, and the mental hurdles. I mean, some people can get over it better than others. Some people are going to be like me, and they might bounce back even better than I did. Some are going to need, help, but we're definitely going to have a counseling program. Everything about that program, I'm going to design it around based because of my own experiences with that. I mean, and especially, married couples that make it through being out on the street and starting to get on their feet, because there's a lot of damage there, and I want to make sure there's counseling there for them, because